Hey, you all stupid mouth breathers. Just in case you don't know, I'm probably one of the most talented, charismatic, and probably handsome guy in this God green earth right now. And I'm a generational talent. I'm probably one of the most honest and talented guy in YouTube. And I have decided to react on videos like rugby versus football, or the key difference between rugby and football. And I don't know why Americans call this football. It's look like watermelon. It's like Stewie's head from Family Guy. But anyways, as you know, Americans are dumb, so let's react how they came up with this stupid idea.
American football and rugby seem like similar sports, but of the many differences, there's a huge one that clearly sets them apart. Rugby union has 15 players per team, as opposed
15.
to 11 in the NFL. But crucially, every NFL team has two entirely separate groups of players, one for offensive situations and one for defensive situations. Whereas in rugby, the 15 players that start the game play in every situation, regardless of whether they are defending or attacking. Similar to soccer, rugby employs substitution rules. Each team is allowed to make 8 per game, but with some exceptions, once a player has been substituted off, they cannot return. Conversely, NFL teams even have specialist kickers, players whose only responsibility is to enter the field to kick and then leave again. But although it's extremely rare today, there is currently a player who plays both on offense and defense. Travis Hunter, a college player from Colorado, never really comes off the field, playing wide receiver on offense and cornerback on defense. And he's currently favorite to win this year's Heisman Trophy.
Okay, so he's like Anthony Davis. Now a second video, key difference between rugby and football.
Rugby and American football have some key differences. Firstly, the fields they play on are different sizes, such as American football fields are smaller and narrower
Smaller and narrower? What the heck?
Secondly, the number of players on each team is different, as rugby teams have 15 players, while American football teams have 11 players.
Okay.
Thirdly, the shape of the ball is different, as rugby balls are more rounded, while American footballs are more
And both are shit anyway.
Additionally, the gear players wear is different, as American football players wear more protective equipment compared to rugby players, who wear varying gear depending on their position. Scoring also differs in American football. A touchdown gets 6 points, while in rugby, a try scores 5 points. Finally, the rules for passing and timeouts vary. In rugby, all players can pass the ball forward, and there are no timeouts, whereas in American football, forward passing and timeouts are allowed.
Alright. So why the American football, they wear those, shield and protectors? It feels like a very physical game, you know what I'm saying? Now the main one, a big video, like 6-minute video.
In the late 1880s, the sport of rugby was beginning to spread across college campuses in the United States. The game was hugely popular, but not with everyone. Yale player Walter Camp was particularly critical of the lack of tactics involved in the chaotic and inconsistent scrum. And at the 1880 Intercollegiate Rugby Convention, he proposed an innovation, the scrimmage. This marked the beginnings of a codified separation between the American sport of football and the English sport of rugby. And the two games have followed very different paths since then. But how different are they today?
Okay. So that's where the difference
Rugby and American football have pretty similar aims: to get the ball into your opponent's end zone. In rugby, the ball has to be grounded to score a try, while in football, just running into the end zone is enough for a touchdown.
Okay.
A try is worth 5 points, where a touchdown is worth 6, but in rugby, after scoring a try, if a team can then kick the ball between the goalposts from any place in line with where the try was grounded, then they can add 2 points in what's known as a conversion. Points can also be scored in rugby if a team decides to kick a penalty between the posts, which is worth 3 points. Penalties are awarded for fouls and are similar to field goals, but must be taken from where the foul was committed, meaning that kickers often attempt to score points at an angle, rather than kick straight at the goalposts. From football,
like
the
team
can
real
also
football.
kick the ball between the posts in open play for 3 points in what's known as a drop goal, but these are relatively rare. Now, it's probably important here to specify that when we say rugby, we're really talking about rugby union, the most popular code of the sport. There's also Rugby League, a different code with different rules, and fans who would be justified in their annoyance at this video describing Rugby Union as just
different rules in a
for the sake of
single
week, we continue. Rugby Union has 15 players on a team. American football has 11. But where it has separate defensive and offensive teams for different game situations, all
American
15 rugby players remain on the pitch or field, regardless of whether they're defending or attacking. And in rugby, it's
like a mass, everybody play.
There are no special teams in rugby either, with a designated player who's on the pitch at all times responsible for kicking dead balls.
Okay.
Rugby teams can be reduced to 14 men temporarily if one of their players is given a yellow card by the referee for a serious foul or
They
indiscipline.
also
This
have
will
yellow
result
card,
in
red
said player
card.
being sent to the sin bin, where they're made to sit out of the match for 10 minutes before returning to the game. A player can be thrown out of a match permanently if they receive a red card, which is essentially the same thing as being ejected.
They also got a red card.
And the playing time of a rugby match is also longer, with 2 40-minute halves as opposed to 4 15-minute quarters. Rugby pitches are also shorter but wider and have H-shaped goalposts situated on the try line instead of the Y-shaped posts that are found at the end of the line of a football pitch. A rugby ball is also slightly wider than a football, although both are roughly the same length. Where it's different though is that rugby players don't wear helmets, although some players may choose to wear a scrum cap in order to avoid cuts, tears and what's known as cauliflower ears. Mouth guards are optional too, but it's very rare that you'll see a player without one. Now, gaining territory is crucial in both sports, but the way that you do this differs massively. The first and arguably most important difference between the two sports is that in rugby, passes made with the hand must go backwards. This is why players who aren't in possession will be situated behind the ball carrier, with anyone in front of them considered offside. If the player receiving the pass drops the ball forwards, then this is considered a knock-on, and the punishment for that is a scrum. A scrum is where the 8 forwards for each team, who tend to be the bigger, stockier players, line up against each other in a 3-4-1 formation. The ball is thrown into the tunnel between the 2 front rows by the team who's been awarded the scrum, at which point the 2 hookers can compete for the ball with their feet and kick it back in the direction of their teammates. The team who throws the ball into the scrum usually retains possession within the scrum because the scrum half, the player who throws the ball into the scrum, and the hooker, the player who competes for it with their feet, can usually synchronize their actions. And the advantage of this scrum is that there will then be more space for the faster backs to gain ground, while all the forwards are concentrated in one area. Scrums are also awarded if a player has played a forward pass, meaning that players have to pass the ball backwards and then run the ball forwards to gain territory. The only type of forward pass allowed is when a player kicks the ball up the pitch for a teammate to run onto. This obviously has a higher risk of losing possession, but a higher chance of gaining crucial territory. And this is all fundamentally, of course, different to football, where a quarterback can throw the ball forwards to gain that territory. Football teams also have to gain 10 yards within a cycle of 4 attempts. But in rugby, there is no requirement for how much territory you have to gain with each play, and no limit to how many times players can be grounded within a cycle of possession. And only the player in possession of the ball can be tackled, meaning that blocking is not allowed. A tackle occurs when the ball carrier is brought to the ground. At this point, the ball carrier must release the ball immediately once they've been tackled, and the tackler must release the ball carrier before both players roll away to allow other players to contest for the ball. If the ball is on the ground, then a ruck is formed, where players can't handle the ball but must instead use their feet to move the ball back to their teammates or drive over so that the static ball emerges at the team's hindmost foot, where it can then be picked up.
It's pretty much complicated.
Alternatively, if a player is able to stay on his feet when being tackled and is backed up by one of his teammates, then a maul is formed. The team in possession of the ball can attempt to gain territory by driving their opponents back towards the opponent's try line. Mauls will often occur after line-outs, which happens when a ball goes off the side of the pitch. A selection of forwards will line up perpendicular to the touchline, 1 metre apart, before the hooker throws the ball in between them to try and catch. In order to receive particularly high throws, players can be helped into the air by their teammates, but must be supported until they return to the ground for safety purposes. In open play, line-outs are given to opponents of the team who kick the ball out of play.
Too much complicated.
If they receive a penalty though, teams have the option to kick for touch further up the field, meaning they will retain possession and get to throw the line-outs. And teams will often do this if they feel they can get the ball closer to the goal line to increase the chance of scoring.
This rugby game is too much complicated. Can't get it. Like American football, I think it's much more easier to understand, but this rugby thing it's pretty much complicated. So I hope you talentless guys enjoyed my video. So please drop a like in this video if you liked my video, and if you want to support this generational talent, please drop the subscribe button.